The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Oh, there we go. Technical glitch there. So let's restart that, shall we? Turns out I started the webinar and forgot to unmute my microphone. All right, so good afternoon and welcome to our webinar. This is the first of a 10-step series looking at the 10 steps of project management. And we're going to start off today with defining project and preparing for planning. I want to just welcome everyone to the webinar. We've got quite a diverse group right across the country. Actually across North America, with some people joining us from south of the 49th. So those on the west coast and west of here, good morning. Those of you joining us from Ontario and east, good afternoon. So just to cover off a little bit of quick housekeeping, you'll notice in the panel to your right, when you started this, we had a little, you have some icons. The top one is a small red one with an arrow. You can collapse that panel off to the side if you need some more space on your screen, or you can click it left and bring it back out so you can interact with the panel. There's a couple of areas on the bottom. You can raise your hand. At the bottom of those icons, there's a little hand up icon, so if there's an issue or a concern or if you have a question, please feel free to raise your hand. Lauren's with us today who's going to help us out, and she'll direct me if anyone has some of those questions. Also, there's a chat window down the bottom corner there, so if you have a question or a concern, if you are running into some technical issues, please fill in a comment in the chat, and Lauren will do her very best to get you sorted out. If you do run into some technical issues and it's not working for you, we will be recording the session, so it will be available later. So we'll be sending an email out for that. So let's get started. Now, as I mentioned, this is the first in a series of 10. So we're looking at defining the project, preparing for planning, which is really getting off to the right foot. And I wanted to open our session today with an opening thought. And this thought comes from our friend Albert. If I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about the solution. Really, this is going to be kind of our theme for today. When we talk about getting off to the right foot and defining the project, we're really talking about defining the problem. If we can do a better job of defining the problem, we're going to do a better job of coming up with a solution that actually addresses that problem, and hence have a better product that we deliver to our customer at the end. It's been my experience, and I'm sure many of you have had this as well, that people jump straight to the solution. We really haven't fully baked what's going on here. They jump straight to the solution. We're very solution-focused, very solution-oriented, so we really kind of jump straight to that solution, and hence we don't fully bake the problem and kind of really figure out what the issue is. To start off today, I want to pose a question. What are the challenges you face in managing projects? So in the question area, in the panel to the right, if you just click on the little plus beside questions, if you can enter your answers in there, and what we'll do is we'll have a look at those questions. We're going to give you about a minute to do that. So if you can just answer that question, what are some of the challenges that you face? Scope creep, absolutely. Okay, we got a little bit of a technical challenge because I can only see them one at a time. So communications, huge. Nailing down the requirements, absolutely. Getting that support from our senior management. Yes, communications comes up a couple times. People conflicts, very much so, absolutely. Getting the team to understand the scope. We're going to be starting to lay some foundation for that through our session today. Time constraints. Yep, absolutely. What else is that? Sticking to previous decisions. That's a good one as well. Absolutely. Okay. So thank you so much for those. We often start off our sessions here at SPM by asking this question: what are some of the challenges that you face? And this really helps us put some context into what we're looking at. So here's some of the common responses that we see. Lack of resources. Changing scope or scope creep. And we're actually, step 2, when we detail in scope, we're going to separate out scope change and scope creep and what they are, because there's a common misconception that if my scope changes, that is scope creep, and it's actually not. So they are 2 separate things. So you have to come back for step 2 for that one. Unrealistic timelines and budgets is another one that we've commonly get. Lack of senior management support. So again, sticking with those previous decisions, getting the support from senior management to get us the resources that we need. So we tend to find a lot of these challenges are often interlinked or interwoven. And of course, unclear requirements and changing requirements or needs. And this session hopefully will help us put some pieces in place to help prevent some of those items. Just as we move forward, one thing I forgot to mention, as we are dealing with technology here and doing the voice over the internet, sometimes the syncing of the voice is a little bit off. So if you notice that the video and the actual audio is not quite synced, if you could just bear with us, we find that usually it tends to settle down and start to work after a couple of minutes. Okay. So we're going to start, so now that we have those challenges identified, we want to take a look at what is a project. Let's just do a quick definition here. It's a unique venture. It has a beginning, it has an end. And this is an important piece a lot of people don't really kind of think about. We get into projects and they start to roll on and on and on. And if we haven't defined the end state, we're really setting ourselves up for getting into one of those scenarios where we just keep rolling and rolling and rolling. So at the beginning of our project, we want to define the end state. And really, that's a lot of what our session today is going to be about. It's really kind of defining and tightening down that end state. It's carried out by people. One of the challenges we identified there was, people challenges, people issues, conflicts. And, we can apply all of the project management tools and techniques and rigor we want, but if we're not dealing with the people issues, we're not going to get the job done. It meets a specific goal, so again, we have that end target or deliverable, and it is absolutely constrained. I've asked this question for many years now. Who has unlimited resources? I've yet to have anyone step forward and say, I do. So we are constrained by time, by cost, by resources, by scope, by quality, by risk, and there's the classic diagram, what we used to refer to as the triple constraints, the triangle diagram. And what we're looking at is we have our time and our cost, our resources, our scope, quality, and in the center of that triangle is risk. Our main job as project managers is to find the right balance, because when we start doing things faster or cheaper, we're increasing risk. When we start to mitigate risk and tighten that down, we add money, we add time, potentially we add scope, and finding that right balance so that we can deliver something that's actually meaningful and useful to our clients. So we're going to just put up a quick poll question. We've been talking a lot about projects. We've defined what a project is. We've looked at some of the challenges. So let's look at the other side of the coin. How do you define project success? So a poll will appear for you in a few moments on your screen, and we'd like you to just click on the appropriate option of what you think project success looks like. We have about 30% voted, 50% voted. You guys are going fast and furious. Love it. 68%, 71% voted, 75% voted. This is a very good, interesting results here. Okay. 82%, so you've got another 30 seconds. Okay, so we're 86% voted. So this gives us a good representation of the results. So let's take a look at those results. 44% said on time, on scope, on budget. 51% said client accepts the deliverable, and 5% get the job done. All right, beautiful results, love it. Now, this is very typical of the type of results that we get when we ask this question. And in my mind, in my feeling, I think the correct answer is number 2. The client accepts the deliverable. Now, let's take a look at number 1, on time, on scope, on budget. The issue we have here is that while I can deliver on time, on scope, and on budget, and those are important criteria, absolutely, have you ever been in a project where you delivered on time, on scope, on budget, and then the customer didn't accept the deliverable? And let's think about that for a second. We just spent 2 years, $5 million, and the customer doesn't accept the deliverable. It's useless to them for whatever reason. We don't have a successful project. Similarly, we deliver on time, on scope, on budget, and you know what? We're just PO'd everyone on the team. Half the people quit the company. Not very sustainable. So we want to move beyond just on time, on scope, on budget, because those are absolutely important factors. But unless our customer accepts the solution, we don't have a successful project. I want to shift that focus a little bit and think about projects where you delivered late or over budget and yet was still considered a success. Okay? And that's really because the clients accepted the solution. Now, does that mean we can now run amok and deliver late and over budget? No, not at all. It needs to deliver within the acceptable levels. Okay? So we need to have the customer accepting the solution. We need to transition that solution into production so that it's actually being used. And then we need to deliver within the acceptable levels. An acceptable level might be from a scenario of, for example, let's use Y2K. Imagine delivering a Y2K project late. Yeah, not good. But there's lots of Y2K projects that were considered a raving success, and they were delivered well over budget. So, we want to expand our definition of what that project success looks like. Now, the last 2 items on our slide here. Stakeholders are eager to start to work on the next project, and team members want to work together again. Looking for continuous improvement. So we want to not get into a scenario where we're delivering at all costs. We still need to get the job done, absolutely. So those who are brave enough to say get the job done as a success criteria, totally agree. You do need to get the job done. We need to get a job done at an acceptable level. So we're going to try and find that balance off on how we get this done. I'm going to introduce you to our 10 steps. And our 10 steps are divided into 4 areas: initiating, planning, executing, closing. There's a 5th area that layers on top of those 4, which is monitor and control. And for those of you who have read PMBOK or done any study from PMI, you'll recognize those 5 areas. Those are our 5 process groups. They're often mistaken as phases of a project. And in our model here, we're kind of using them as phases, keeping in mind, of course, that although you're in the execution phase, you're always going to be jumping back into planning. So it's not like they're distinct, discrete phases. They do definitely overlap. Initiating is all about getting started. So what are we doing? Where are we going? That sort of thing. We're defining the project. That's the step we're going to focus on today. And our major deliverable for this is a charter. I'm just going to walk through the other 10 steps, or the other 9 steps very quickly. So in planning, we've got defined scope, where we detail out the scope, roles, responsibilities, and estimating, sequencing our work packages, so now that we know the work needs to be done, putting in the right order, developing the schedule, so now that we know what order it's happening in, we need to develop our schedule, doing our cost estimating, identify, analyze, and respond to risk, huge factor, and then step 8 is go for approval and get our baselines. Now, although these steps are ordered and numbered, they're not discrete, which means you're going to be doing risk analysis throughout. And it's also very iterative, which means you might get down to, say, step 5 or 6, and then step back to 2, for example. You're going to iterate through that multiple times until you've got this thing sorted out. Now, as a project manager, you really need to be bipolar. During the planning phase, it's all, whoa, cowboy, let's slow down and think about this. When you get into execution, it's giddy up. So we need to shift gears from planning, where we're slowing down and analyzing and thinking and looking at scenarios. Now that we've finalized the planning, gotten that baseline, we need to get the job done. So let's get to work. So step 9 is all about getting the job done, executing the plan. So now you have the plan, work it. And then finally, closing, probably the most neglected area of project management. this is where we need to shut down our project. This is where we do our lessons learned, where we kind of wrap it all up. So today we're going to focus on step 1. And just before we get formally into that, I just want to touch on the roles within project management, because this will help give us a context for our discussions today. The first role is senior management. Now, within any organization, we have multiple projects that we would like to do. So we might have, let's say, 100 in flight. So we're actually doing 100 projects. There might be another 100 in the wings waiting to be started that we simply don't have the resources for, again, not having unlimited resources. So it's senior management's job to decide which projects get funded, approved, and which ones do not. The sponsor is our connection to senior management. This is our champion, our go-to guy or gal. And the sponsor's role really is about support. It's about supporting us. It's about removing barriers. The customer, their role is defining what is acceptable and then to actually do that acceptance. Oftentimes, the sponsor and the customer are the same person. So here I just want to highlight that we're talking about roles. We're separating out the person from the job, and if you have the one person doing that, that's absolutely fine, but keeping in mind that, we need to have those roles involved in our project. The doer, yes, it's a word. The doer is the person who does the work, or the team. And then finally, the project manager, us. The project manager, look at the word manager, you manage the project. You are not doing the work. Now, if you're on a very small project, yes, you're going to play a dual role. You're going to be a doer and a project manager. Keeping in mind, of course, that when you're doing your work, when you're playing the role of doer, your project is now technically adrift. So you want to make sure that periodically you take off your doer hat, you put on your project manager hat. So you want to make sure you switch those around and spend a few moments, spend a couple minutes, managing the overall project, not just your corner. That can be a very easy trap to fall into. So, step 1, define the project and prepare for planning. So just to remind us where we are. Again, this is a series of 10 webinars, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be walking through all 10 steps. Our next question. Again, we'll use our question panel over on the right. And what I would like you to do is answer this question. What is the purpose of the charter? So what is the purpose of the charter? Love it. Steering team alignment, high-level plan. Hard to pick just one. Absolutely, yes. So there's actually multiple purposes there. And I'm going to try and boil it down, make it a little bit simplified. Identify and define broad scope of a project. Wow, you guys are going fast. Organizing high-level outline serves as a contract, right, which the project will deliver. Overall project plan. Okay, we're gonna address that one. Gone a little bit too far on that one. Gain alignments, or sorry, gain agreement. Excuse me. Ensure final goals are met. Absolutely, you guys are putting some good answers in today. Describe the purpose of the project and summary for the entire plan. Description of the project outlines the wants and needs of the customer. Nice, like that one. List the purpose of the project. Beautiful. You guys are quite savvy. This is great. I'm loving this. Okay. So if I look at PMBOK, it's basically documents the commitment between the sponsor, the project manager, often the customer. So really about getting permission, the formal authorization. Now, again, we're going to scale this up and down based on what makes sense. So if I'm doing that very small project, it's a couple weeks, there's 3 of us on the team, that charter, that authorization might look like just an email from my boss. If we're doing a $5 million 3-year project, it's going to be bigger. Okay, and we're going to scale that to what makes sense. Now, I'm a big fan of boiling it down to its core essence, right? And there's lots of good answers there when we ask that question. Things like, actually, I can just pull those back up. I love this technology. This is great. So description of the project outlines, purpose of the project, and the objectives, defining the deliverables, some great answers here. I'm going to boil it down to a simple word. Just answer the question why. And let's think about this in terms of our experiences. The better you answer the question why we're doing the project, the better you'll be able to A, make decisions, B, make sure that you're on track, this kind of goes back to that whole concept of you can't see the forest for the trees. So when we're getting into our project, we have to get really focused down on the details, which is great, and we need to do that. We also need to remain aware of the bigger picture. And the bigger picture in terms of our project is, why are we doing this? I've been on a couple of projects where, we started down one path, we got distracted, or things changed, we ended up going down another path, and then we sort of stepped back and said, well, is this addressing the original why, or is this staying true to the essence of kind of why we started and the reason that we're here? And if it's not, it might be the best time at that point to perhaps shut things down or get us back on track. So really asking that question, why are we doing this? Now I want to share an experience of a project I was on. This was a big multi-year project. It was for a large financial. And here's the reason why we're doing the project. If we don't do this project, we have to shut the organization down and senior management goes to jail. Okay, and this, it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but honestly that was the reason for doing the project. So you can imagine the level of senior management support that we had in executing this project. I actually got a call personally from the CIO of the organization, keeping in mind this is a financial organization. So this is, she's right up there. And she wanted to know how many people were slow in responding. And then she phoned those people personally. And we talked about level of support. So the better you can answer this question of why we're doing the project, the better support you're going to get from your sponsor, from your senior management. It'll address a lot of those issues. It will also help us as managers of our project to stay on track. How many times have we had someone burst into the meeting and say, I've got the solution to all our problems, we just need to implement this piece of software. And, okay, what problem is that addressing? Right? I call this the shiny object syndrome. So people get distracted by the shiny objects. Hey, here's a cool piece of technology, let's put it in place. Right? Okay. So if we answer that question, why? Now, we're just going to do a very quick activity right now. We call this the alignment activity. I want you to grab a piece of paper, a little scrap, post-it note, whatever, and I want you to draw, just stick figures are fine. I want you to just quickly sketch the following. I'm going to say a word, and I want you to draw what this means to you. The word is fly, F-L-Y, fly. Maybe about 30 seconds to just sketch something out. So we're going to bring up a poll question. Okay. So I'd like you to just check off, what did you draw? Did you draw a bug? Did you draw a plane, a bird, other? And if you drew an other, if you could just pop into the chat window and type in what you drew. I'm curious as to what people drew. So we have 5% that drew. Oh, we got a couple Supermen. So we got 2% Supermen. All right, 52 voted. So just click off what you drew. And if you actually didn't end up getting to draw anything, if you just check off what you would have drawn, what popped into your head first thing when I said the word fly? Okay. Awesome. So we have, let's show those results. So 35%, 34% drew a bug, 36% drew a plane, 19% drew a bird, and this is very normal distribution. 1% did Superman. Yay. And we had 10% other. So I'm curious as to what, if you did an other, pop into the chat window and just type in what you drew. Okay, I'm not seeing anything there. Perhaps if we look into the questions, people might be putting it in there. Open sky. Ooh, that's a nice one. That'd be a nice drawing. Mary Poppins. I love it. That's brilliant. Okay. I'm going to switch back to my screen now. Oops. That. I want to do this. There we go. Okay, did anyone draw a zipper? I'm not sure if we have any zippers today. So it's interesting. We take something as that simple, right? And we look at communication, and especially when we start dealing with a technical area, talking to a business, right? And a business is a technical area. I mean, it's technical in its business. And then we start to interface with a technical area, whether that's technology like IT or a technical area like legal or maybe learning and development. And we all have our own nomenclatures. We all have our own wording. So when we start to do that, are we talking the same language? Are we talking the same vernacular? And are we being understood? So a big purpose of the charter really is to gain that alignment so that we can make sure that we are all speaking not only the same language, but we're on the same page, we're headed in the same direction. So we want to try to create that alignment. Really, that's a lot of what the charter is all about. And if we can do that at the beginning of our project, before we really get into the main meat of planning, we're going to be so much further ahead, because this is the foundation to it, folks. So we talked about the major deliverable here being the charter documents. We're representing that in the upper left. The charter document is really going to define the business need and at a higher level the scope. Now on the bottom right we have the detailed plan. The detailed plan, yes, it's going to take into account the business need, it's going to flesh out the product scope, and then it's also going to flesh out and detail the project scope. So we're going to break our scope down into three elements or three parts. The need, the why, if we're doing this, the product, which is the what, so this would be your features and functions, and then finally the project scope, which is the how. So if my project is to deliver a cell phone, for example, I want to first of all ask, of course, what's the business need here? But if I've figured out, okay, we need a cell phone, now I want to start thinking product-wise, what features do I want? Does it need a camera? Does it need to be able to chat? Does it need to be able to do email? Or do I simply just need something to make a phone call? What does that look like? So now that we've detailed out the product, we now need to start to think about the project. How am I going to get there? Now, this could happen in the terms of we go out and purchase it, so it's an acquisition project, or I can build it. So if we have an issue where, or excuse me, a project where we're going to deliver this product, we then have the question, well, how do we get to that end stage product? What does that look like? Do we create it, do we build it, or do we go and purchase it? So there's lots of good cell phones out on the market, so perhaps there'll be one out there that will meet our needs. And we have to be careful when we start to get into standard off-the-shelf products, whether that's software or hardware or equipment, that we make sure that we are still staying true to the need. Now, the other piece that we need to do is we need to make sure that there's a connection between the why, the what, and the how. We need to connect the why to the what. So when we step forward into going straight to the solution and we haven't properly defined the need, we tend to start at the product level. And oftentimes we're selecting the product from a straight, you know, hey, this is a cool product, right? But is it really addressing our business need? And when we get down to the project scope is how are we going to create this? Now, do we have all the work we need to create those features and functions? And are those features and functions then hence tying back to the business need? So we call this a traceability matrix. We look at a process for defining this. And this process, we want to ask the questions and document the answers. And as you notice, it starts at the top with define the real need. We're going to focus today just on the first three. And in focusing on those first three, now, define the real need, define the end product, which is our acceptance criteria, which includes our acceptance criteria, and then determine the priorities of the project. That's where we're going to focus our discussions today. This doesn't mean that describe the organizational context, assign the project manager, and do the order of magnitude estimates is not important. It absolutely is. But those are really more mechanical. Once we've done the top three, the rest of them kind of fall into place. And then, of course, we prepare the actual charter document itself. But let's focus in on those top three. So what is the real need? Problem, need, or opportunity? You need to look at your project and say, what is the problem, what's the need, what's the opportunity that this project is going to address? And it might be, excuse me, it might be that you address one or more of those. You might have two or three. We then take that and look at what end product or deliverable is going to address that. And this leads directly to the acceptance criteria. So from now on, whenever you think deliverable, whenever you think product scope, I want you to think in terms of acceptance criteria. So let's continue to use our cell phone example. Imagine that your project was to create a cell phone. So we create, we want to create the next new iPhone. And imagine that when you've completed this project, so we're at the end of our time, we're at the end of our project, we've got the product. We've tested it, it's working, we're happy with our result, and we take it to our customer to deliver it to them. Now naturally they're going to want to try it out and test it. So they take their new iPhone and they walk down to the parking lot, they put it on the ground and they drive over it with their car. And I know if any of you have ever driven over your phone with your car, guilty, I have. They tend not to survive the experience very well. So the thing is though, could you build a cell phone that would survive being driven over by a car and being dropped in water and being frozen? Well, absolutely. I mean, technology is there. It's not that hard to do. The thing is, I need to know that that's what the acceptance criteria is, because if I'm building this to be used in a distant, remote environment that's potentially outdoors by maybe construction workers or forest firefighters or something like that, where they're using it out in the field, we're gonna need to know that acceptance criteria at the beginning so that we can build to that criteria and then hence deliver the criteria, because otherwise you're going to get to the end of the project, the customer is going to go, this looks great, let me go try it, let me test it, let me accept it, and oh gee, that's not acceptable. The last piece is the priorities. We started out earlier today talking about time, cost, and scope. And yes, on time, on scope, on budget are important factors, but we want to do that within our balance because we cannot deliver good, fast, and quick. Right? We have to find out the balance. So the question that I always ask at the beginning of my projects is this: of time, cost, and scope, which is the most important? The answer I always get back is they're all important. It's like, oh, of course they're all important. Totally agree. My question is, of the three, which is the number one priority? Which is the number two priority?
Gina, it's Catherine McKernan calling. Have you been able to get on the webinar as of yet?
You can now make
I'm calling from SPM.
So using the example on screen here, if time is my number one
Awesome.
priority,
Okay. I'll send you recorded for the rest of your team. I'll send them the recorded version. I'll send it to you, and you can pass it out to them if that works for you. Okay. Enjoy the webinar. Bye.
Scenario. So I mean, imagine delivering, or you're working on a Y2K project or a finite deadline. We still see Y2K type projects. They're usually in the form of regulatory. Imagine going to your boss and saying, boss, I need more time. Doesn't work. So we need to understand what our priorities are, because it's not always time number one, money number three. Sometimes it's money is number one and time is number three, or scope is number one and time is number three. Whatever that looks like. You need to identify what it is for that project. But beware, because those priorities can change. And what will happen is over time, we're going to, oh, I think we might have a technical issue. I'm just going to pause for a second. Lauren? Are we good? We're good? Okay, sorry, we're back. Technical issue apparently. It sounds like we're back, so I'm going to keep going. So let me just restart that last little piece. Priorities. So we need to identify what are the priorities. What's our number one, what's our number two, what's our number three. And this is really key to managing our project. Webinar has reached maximum number. Oh, okay. Yay, we're at maximum number. Awesome. So that means we've got lots of people out there. This is great. So we need to identify our priorities. What's our number one priority, our number two priority, our number three? This is key to managing my project, because like I say, in that one where time is absolutely 100% number one, I can't go and say I need more time. Right? We need to balance that out, and it's going to be key to our decision making. We want to do that early. But be aware, it can change over time. So if you're in the public sector, every 4 years, you get into silly season, right? As a friend of mine likes to call it. And you know what, priorities tend to start to switch around and flip upside down and things like that. So you want to be very aware of that and understand and know where you are, what the priorities of your project are, and have those conversations with your sponsor ahead of time. Components of our charter. So now that we've got the essence of the charter, why we're doing that, which is to answer the question why, we've looked at some of the key elements there, identifying the problem, your opportunity, figuring out what the product is, and again, you're going to do that at a high level, because during the scope phase, we're going to tighten that down. And then third, we're going to figure out what our priorities are in our project. We need to create a document to to document and house all of this information. Of course, this is going to help support our communication. Components, executive summary. Include your why in here. This is your elevator pitch, folks. This is your why should I do this. Now, let's all put our senior management hats on for a moment. We've got 200 projects. We have enough funding to do 100 projects. Which ones? You're going to flip through these charters, read that executive summary and say, in or out. The next step is the strategic business alignment. Is this project aligned with the strategic objectives of the organization? So if it's not aligned with the strategic objectives of the organization, why would I put any resources to it? The better you can answer the question why I'm doing this, and the more tightly you're aligned to the strategic goals of the organization, the better you are going to get support from senior management, get funded, have your sponsor enabled to remove barriers and things like that. Now, project definition. This includes your acceptance criteria. And I want to spend a little bit of time on this. In project definition, you're basically identifying what is the product or the thing that you're going to be delivering. So anytime you're looking at defining a deliverable, you want to define the acceptance criteria. Now, at the beginning of our journey, we start out at initiating. We often don't have all of those details, so we use this thing called progressive elaboration and iteration. Now, if I'm doing a small, short project, you know what, I probably got all the details I need. However, if I'm starting into a long project, a large project, and this might be a big 5-year initiative, I probably don't have many details at this point. In fact, we might not even have the answer to should we do this, yes or no. So we might take our project and divide it down into phases. And that first phase might be some analysis to simply say, should we do this, yes or no? So you want to really look at what does that end product look like when you're done this project. And this project might be the first phase or mini project, sub-project if you will, in multiple projects that are going to end up taking 5, 10 years and end up in a much larger deliverable when you're done. So to give you a quick example of what that might look like. Your deliverable could be something hard, tangible, physical, like our cell phone example. Or potentially it could be some intellectual property, such as a business process. Right? So we're identifying what are the process, what are the steps. It could also be a decision. Okay, so maybe I need to put together a report so that we can make a decision. So you really want to be very clear as to what that end product looks like. And years ago when I was working for Major Financial, I was heading up the technology group for the audit division. And from a strategic business perspective, they decided to move off of a particular technology. So we were tasked with taking a look at our in-house tool and moving it to a different platform. Well, the funny thing is with audit software in particular, it tends to prefer the platform that we're on. So I knew starting out that most of the solutions out there run on the same platform. So we did an initial project to identify what are our options. And the deliverable of that project was simply a report that listed out what are the various options that we have available to us, what were the costs, factors, and so forth. And that was the first phase of what became a larger project to migrate to a different environment. So we detailed that down because at the beginning of the project, the kind of why we're doing this was to move off of the technology that was being decommissioned within the organization. But we had a big unknown question of where do we move to and what's that going to look like and how are we going to do that. So we needed to investigate that. So the deliverable on our first project was simply the report, and then based on the information in that report, we were now able to make our decision to decide what solution we could actually go to. So here we had a project where the product or the deliverable or the solution was simply some information that would help us get to the definition of the product or solution. So you really want to be very clear as to what you're actually delivering here. Okay? And don't be afraid to say, you know what, we don't really know what the full solution is. We don't even really know what the full problem is. We need to do some analysis and dig into that. And then finally, the approvals. You need to get approval to run your project. So your charter is your formal document that will allow you to get that approval, to get that permission. Now, we need to prepare for planning. So now that we have our charter document, we also want to consider the communications plan. We identified in our barriers and our challenges at the beginning that communication is a big challenge. And there's even some things that come out of communication. So there was the people conflict aspect, often comes out of communication or miscommunication. There's the defining the scope and scope changes, and defining the need. Well, sometimes those come out of simple miscommunications. So right up front, you want to define your communications plan. 80–90% what you're going to do as a project manager is communicate. So define your communications plan. What is the purpose of the communication? I tend to look at it much like a little mini project. Why are we doing this? How are we going to do this? What does it look like when it's done? Who's going to be responsible for it? You know, those sort of factors. So the purpose of the communication, the who, so who's going to prepare the information, who's going to send it, who's going to receive it. We often adjust our communication depending upon the audience that we're talking to. We may take the same data and repackage it, put it in a different light to communicate it to a different audience. When, how often? We're constantly fighting for people's time and attention. So let's not do the shotgun and overload people, but we also need to find the right balance where we're putting out enough information but not too much. And that's really part of the art of project management. And of course, what details required and how are we going to get there. Please think about how last. Most people tend to jump straight to the how first. Now, we are going to have challenges on our project. We're going to have issues. So this will lead to changes, we need to consider how are we going to deal with those changes. Working with within your environment, you probably have a change control process already, so leverage it. Don't reinvent the wheel. Right? So how will the changes be documented? How will they be evaluated? Who's going to make those decisions? And of course, we run into issues. And we want to define what is an issue, how are we going to deal with that, and unresolved issues, they will lead, they're a source of big conflicts. As I like to say, identify problems when they're small, they're easy to fix. If we wait till they get big, they're hard to fix. They're easy to identify, but they're hard to fix. It's really all about hitting the target. And that's really kind of what we're talking about today. Do we know what the target is? And if we understand the why, we have a much better chance of being able to retain that target and stay on track. So I had a quick little, I actually discovered this quote last night while I was just doing a last-minute review. And a fanatic is one who redoubles his effort when he has forgotten his aim. So it's really, it's good to redouble our effort, but let's make sure that we're doing that and staying effective. Okay. So let's see if we can put all of this to work. Let me give you a quick little case study. So Acme Corporation has decided to sell off its rocket-powered roller skate division. Unfortunately, rocket-powered roller skate sales are kind of down, and the division's now, no longer viable. Unfortunately, we have a buyer, so we're going to sell it off. Management has decided to relocate the remaining divisions. So we're going to basically do an office move. Okay. So my 3 questions for you are, and let's do them one at a time. The first questions, we'll use our questions area, is what is the real need behind this? So take about 30 seconds or so and enter what are the real needs behind this. Profitability, save money, liking it. Let's give it about another 30 seconds or so. Viability, saving money. Reduce the losses. Get out of the business which is loss. Beautiful. Move the remaining divisions, efficiencies, cost cutting. Ooh, realignment of assets. Love that one. All right. Ensure cost savings. Reduce real estate costs. Reduce losses. So lots of along that very similar theme. Okay, so it's all about reducing the costs. With that in mind, I want you to think about what is the product or what is the deliverable that's going to address that need. So we want to put in here now, what is the product or the deliverable that's going to address that? So someone said relocating, being able to change our focus to more profitable avenues, new offices is the product. The sale, interesting. So we've actually, our project is actually, they've announced they're going to sell the division and we're supposed to relocate. So that's actually the focus of our project. Return on investment, new office space. Ooh, a new beginning. Wow, that's very, very, very earth-shattering. Reduce staff for this division. Interesting. So there's two products, sale transition and the new offices. Or sorry, the sale transaction. Apologies, new offices. Okay, great. So some good answers there. Now, the third question is, what are the priorities? And what we're going to do is we're going to use a poll for this. So time, resources, which is cost and people, and scope. So on this poll questions, we'll open up the poll. You can identify which one of those three has the most flexibility. So remember, I like to do the what's 1, 2, and 3. The other option is you can say which one of these three has flexibility. So when you answer this, you're choosing the one that has the most flexibility. So we'll open up the poll. Okay, so our poll is now open. And we want you to choose which one of these three do you think has the most flexibility. So hence, if your project became challenged, you go to your boss and say, I need to change X. I need more time, I need more resources, or I need to descope. So which has the most flexibility? Wow, this is interesting. So 37% have voted, 42% have voted. Seeing the votes flowing in fast and furious. This is great. Oh my goodness, 30. Okay, I've got 33% straight down the board on all three. Love it. It's like a horse race. Okay, so let's show that poll. Let's share those results. So wow, we've got a very even divide here. 35% saying time, 33% saying resources, and 32% saying scope quality. It can be really tough to nail this down, eh? Yeah. And you know what? We can make a very valid argument for each of those. So if I say that time has the most flexibility, you know what? The focus here, we need to save money. So if I'm going to save money by taking a little bit longer and taking some time, so imagine going to your boss and saying, you know what, boss? I need to extend the project a little bit, but in doing so, I'm actually going to keep the costs under control. I'm thinking that might be pretty acceptable. So we then get into resources, right, which includes money. So now you're going and saying, you know, we need to get this done fast, right? We're not going to let it slip. We've locked down the scope. We know what we're doing. We're going to have to throw a little bit of money at this to get this job done. And there can be a good argument there as well, still supporting the real need here, in that every month I stay at the old location, it's costing me more money. So, you know what? If I take longer to get this job done, there's a side cost here that can really impact us. And then finally, scope or quality. Well, you know what? If I'm flexible on my scope, perhaps I could have some opportunities here to do things like, let's expand our scope beyond just moving offices to let's, you know, maybe perhaps employ some technology and do some work from home, and you know, even reduce our office space needs even more. You know, maybe go to some more efficient technologies that might actually support our organization even better. So it can be very hard, as you can see, to actually really nail down what is those priorities. But you really want to have that conversation with your bosses. So the office move. The real need here, reduce costs. It's an opportunity, right? We've sold off a division. We went from 200 staff to 150 staff. We've got extra office space that we're not utilizing, so we have an opportunity to save some money here. Okay. The what, or the deliverable, is a new lease. Notice I put in brackets there, the less expensive. So we've been tasked with moving office. So how do we say, you know, that job is done? Well, we've got a signed lease. The important thing here is that lease needs to be less expensive. I could go from our offices here. I could go to a nice downtown location, view of the lake, you know, southern exposure, and I've got the new office. I've got the new, you know, everyone's moved. I've signed the lease, but it's more expensive, so it doesn't stay back to the real need. Okay. And then finally, what are the priorities? Now, I took the liberty of doing 1, 2, and 3 because I could. So I put the number one priority here is cost. Okay. And you know what? Thinking about that, it's the whole purpose of this project, getting those costs under control. Really struggled, though, with what do I put as number 3, time or scope. You know, and you can make those arguments either way. Have that discussion. Make sure that everyone's in agreement. So I decided on scope is my number 2, and then time is my number 3. Basically saying, you know what, I'm going to have some flexibility on scope, but I'm going to have more flexibility on time, because what I want to do is I want to make sure this is done right. For those of you who have ever gone through an office move, you know, it can be quite disruptive to the organization. And we've actually just gone through one ourselves over Christmas. Not only did we do an office move, but we also did a huge technology move. We used to have our servers in-house and host had all of our data hosting. We've now moved to the cloud. So we used the opportunity of moving offices to also move technologies. So it's a huge upheaval. And you know, that's why I thought this would be some good inspiration for our case study. So we're going to continue to use this case study through the rest of the 9 steps as we do this program. Okay, so I'm just going to wrap up with some key points here. Answer the question why. If you cannot clearly, easily answer the question why are you doing this project, you really need to be questioning should you be doing the project at all. The better you can answer the question why, the better you're going to get support, the better you're going to have some of those barriers and challenges removed. Focus on the problem, the need, the opportunity, okay, which really ties back to the why. So if you can focus on the problem, need, or opportunity, this will help guide you through your project, especially when you get into things like scope creep or scope change or a change request. They're saying, well, hey, we should do this, right? And I remember there was an ad years ago, it was an IBM ad, and a programmer had gone on a course to learn how to do you know, to do a website. He just created the website. He's, you know, showing the boss the website. He says, hey, look at this, look at this. And the guy says, wow, that's really nice. It looks awesome. He says, you know, can you do e-commerce and can you do, you know, customer interactive, this and this and this, right? He says, I can do flames. You know, so really asking, you know, is my product addressing the problem or opportunity? And then finally, ensure alignment. Make sure that you, your team, the organization, the product that you're going to be delivering from the project, the deliverable, is all in alignment so that we all get to that same place. And all of this comes back to our opening thought. So what I've been saying for the past hour, well, 55 minutes, how appropriate. We've been defining what is the need, right? So if I can really identify the problem properly, then the solution becomes A, obvious, B, it becomes something that I can, you know, make sure that is in alignment with the technical needs of the organization and will actually provide some benefit, because the reality is, folks, when you run a project, it's an investment by the organization. You're spending the organization's money and resources. Are they getting a benefit?